And I think the compromise that they came up with, if implemented, will make Biden the most progressive president since FDR.
Bernie Sanders joined MSNBC with Chris Hayes to discuss the Joe Biden-Bernie Sanders Joint Policy Task Forces and ultimately what they have come up with and have proposed now to Joe Biden. Now, people appear to be freaking out. At least some people are, and it's pretty hilarious. Both freaking out at what Bernie said in the clip, which I will get to later. I have some things to get to first. And also freaking out at the outcome of these joint policy task forces, even though we've known the whole time, including people that are feigning outrage, that, of course, these task forces were not going to support Medicare for all or Green New Deal or any of Bernie's big policy proposals. We knew that back then, and that's what happened. So before I even get to anything else, let me play the short clip of what I said back in early May about these joint policy task forces. Well, obviously, there's no direct downside to progressives being on these joint task forces. I just say don't expect much. And understand that Biden's platform is the way it is, not because people voted for it. People didn't vote for Biden because of his platform. They voted for him because they thought he was more electable and because he was Barack Obama's VP. Biden's platform is the way it is because of the capitalist interests that back his campaign. Now, I'm not showing you that to say, hey, check me out, I was right. No, that was common knowledge. Everybody was saying that. People that are feigning outrage now about, oh, I can't believe Joe Biden's, the Joint Policy Task Forces don't support Medicare for all or legalizing pot or a Green New Deal. Why are you pretending? Why are people online pretending that they expected anything out of this? This was going to be simply a way to get as far as possible without completely alienating Joe Biden's big donors. That's what this was about the entire time. So let me get to some specifics here. And I will get to some, pluses, the few that exist, I guess, out of the joint task forces. But first here, legalizing pot. So this poll here from Gallup, 2/3 of Americans favor making marijuana usage legal. And this is polling that has been going on since 1971. The recent one is 2019. 66% of people overall, not just Democrats, voters in America overall, 66% support legalizing marijuana. So by the way, if you just poll Democrats, it's like 90% plus. And you could look at other polling that shows even more support than this does for legalizing pot. But there's been a majority of support since about 2012, 2013. And it's only gone up. Yet still, the Democratic Party as a whole and Joe Biden's campaign does not support it. And it's not because they don't see enough support. Clearly, the support is there. In fact, I'll show you their reasoning. So in Politico here, they say, the challenges suggest that Biden's belief on policies such as marijuana are strongly held. He supports decriminalization and medical pot, but his aides have said he needs to see more evidence that weed doesn't endanger people's health before he backs legalization. It's legal in Canada. There have been, I don't even know, countless studies. I feel like weed is one of those things that has been studied more than almost anything else. There are countless studies about it. And the real, apart from the health aspects of it, this is a criminalization issue. This is a criminal justice issue. There are people locked up over this drug that's never killed anybody in the history of the world. You cannot die from overdosing on pot. It's not possible. Yet, he's got to look into the health aspects of it. That is not the reason. I will show you the reason that Biden does not support legalizing marijuana, despite all the support for it, despite all the evidence. The reason he does not support legalizing it is because of this. Contributions from the health insurance and pharmaceutical industries to 2020 Democrats. Who's at the top? Joe Biden. That's why he does not support legalizing marijuana. Who's in second and third? Buttigieg and Klobuchar. Two candidates who dropped out right before Super Tuesday to help Joe Biden to victory. And in case you're wondering, what's the connection here? From Salon, medical marijuana could cost Big Pharma $4 billion a year. And that's medical. So imagine legal. So you have Big Pharma backing Joe Biden's campaign more than anybody else because they want to ensure that marijuana is not legalized. That is why it's a no-go for the Joe Biden campaign. It's not because we got to see more evidence. That's complete BS. It's always been BS. So, and again, this is not anybody paying a little attention already knows this. This is not shocking. So people that are freaking out about this, about the results or lack of results from the Joint Policy Task Forces you must be joking, because we've known this all along. Now, let me get to some other aspects here. So here are some of the wins. Again, not impressive, but they are wins nonetheless. This from NPR. The document recommends that Biden commit to eliminating carbon pollution from power plants by 2035 and to zeroing out net greenhouse gas emissions across the entire economy by 2050. The task forces call for funding universal pre-K across the country, expanding Social Security, raising the national minimum wage, and eliminating cash bail, among many other long-sought progressive stances. So some solid wins there. But it's around the edges. It was never going to be Medicare for all, never going to be Green New Deal, never going to be, the big items that people want to see, that people need in terms of, people need help, especially right now. It's not being offered, and it was never going to be offered by this campaign. This campaign has always been about the alternative to Trump. It's always been about getting out Donald Trump. That's what Joe Biden's campaign has always been about. Now, I also want to reference Varshini Prakash here. So she is the co-founder and executive director of Sunrise Movement, big climate group, and she was on the Joint Policy Task Force on the climate part of it. So she tweeted out here saying, because of our advocacy, the unity position is now to champion policies that will achieve 100% clean electricity by 2035, achieve 100% clean new buildings by 2030, set standards for 100% clean new vehicles as soon as possible. Previous policies centered around a 2050 date. And she also goes on to say, as this is somebody who's honest, is going to be critical of of what wasn't achieved here, goes on to say the Biden campaign could and should go further on fossil fuels, and specifically how we phase out all fossil fuels, with the knowledge that we had to stop burning oil and gas yesterday if staying below 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius of warming will be more than a pipe dream. So she understands not enough wins here, but there was some progress made, and this was always going to happen. This was always obvious to everybody that paid any attention at all to all of this, to any of this. Now, let me get to the Bernie Sanders appearance here, because there are also people that are, again, feigning outrage, or maybe they're not feigning it, but they're actually outraged at a comment that Bernie made here. They appear to not really understand the role that Bernie Sanders has compared to the role that, say, commentators or journalists have. So watch this.
I know today there were these sort of working groups, policy committees that some folks from your presidential campaign staff had been engaged in with the Biden staff. They announced some of the results of that. I saw a poll today I thought was very interesting that showed, I think it was 87% of Sanders supporters supporting Joe Biden, only 4% supporting Trump. And basically the picture it painted, and this is across the various candidates who are in that very crowded primary field, was a very unified Democratic Party, a very unified electorate in defeating Trump. Is that your sense of where things are right now?
Absolutely. Look, I think every person who voted for me, and I think for the other Democratic candidates, fully understands that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president, if not in the modern history of our country, then in the overall history of our country. And that it is absolutely imperative that we come together and defeat him badly. I was glad to work with the vice president in forming 6 separate task forces, which had some of the most knowledgeable people in the country coming together to deal with education and climate change and healthcare and the economy and criminal justice and immigration reform. And these folks, needless to say, people who represented the progressive movement, had a different perspective on things than did Biden's people. But there was serious discussion. and I think a real honest effort to come up with a compromise. And I think the compromise that they came up with, if implemented, will make Biden the most progressive president since FDR. It did not have, needless to say, everything that I wanted, didn't have everything that Biden wanted, but there is no question that on some of the major issues facing this country, if that agenda is implemented, life will improve for tens and tens of millions of working people. It'll improve for our environment and for climate change, criminal justice, and for the needs of low-income people.
All right. So first here, it's important to point out, you can absolutely criticize Bernie's strategy. His strategy in terms of making Joe Biden sound better than he actually is. You can criticize that strategy, but understand his job here is not to be a political commentator. His job is not to just, go on Chris Hayes and then yell and scream about how the Joint Task Force didn't come up with Medicare for all and a Green New Deal and screw Joe Biden. Like, I'm not sure how that's going to lead to any positive result. Understand the role that Bernie has, and his thinking here, his strategy, is to try and appeal to Joe Biden personally. Politicians have egos. If Bernie acts this way in public, again, we're talking about before an election. Once he's in power, the game changes. But before the election, if he can treat Joe Biden with kid gloves the way he is doing, then the thinking here is that Bernie will be able to continue being a voice in Biden's ear, as opposed to him just going on TV and talking crap and getting shut out of the conversation. So people were bothered by the fact that Bernie said Joe Biden's campaign is going to be the most progressive since FDR. I don't think that's wrong. Technically, that's not wrong. I think it's you can say it's misleading, but it's not wrong just based on the way that discussions and policy have progressed over 50, 60 years. I mean, yeah, it's not wrong. Bernie's job here is to try and appeal to Joe Biden personally. Try and continue to stay within his circle, to be a voice. Again, you can criticize that strategy. You can say it's not going to work. But doing the opposite also is not going to work. So you could say maybe Bernie should just stay home and not do anything. Okay, I guess. But if he's going to be on television talking, he's got two options. He's either going to defend Joe Biden and talk about how dangerous Trump is and we should get out Trump, or he's going to talk about how horrible Joe Biden is and like what? What's the result of that? I really don't understand. Like it gets back to, you have to understand the roles that different people play based on their positions in society, based on their access to certain people. So Bernie, who has access to Biden, is going to act a little differently than me, who has no access to Biden. We have different roles here. So nothing here that Bernie said is incorrect. But yes, you can, I guess, criticize the strategy, but I'm not sure what else he can do at this point. Biden has the nomination. What else is going to happen?